Most people think INFJs withdraw from social situations because they're emotionally fragile or socially awkward. They see the quiet retreat, the declined invitations, the preference for staying home, and they assume it's weakness. They're wrong. What looks like emotional avoidance is actually advanced psychological strategy. INFJs don't isolate because they can't handle people. They isolate because they understand people too well. Their solitude isn't reactive, it's calculated. Today, I'm going to show you why INFJ withdrawal represents some of the most sophisticated emotional intelligence you'll ever encounter, and why their alone time is actually preparation for deeper, more meaningful connection than most people will ever experience. Before we start, please hit the like button, comment, and subscribe so you won't miss any of our weekly deep dives into the world of personality types. And if you're looking for a deeper understanding of yourself and your INFJ personality, browse our favorite INFJ products in the description, and click the link in the comments to take our favorite free personality test. The emotional radar overload problem. Here's what happens inside an INFJ's nervous system that most people don't understand. They process emotional data at levels that would overwhelm the average person's psychological capacity. While others are having a conversation, INFJs are simultaneously reading microexpressions, detecting voice tone shifts, analyzing body language, and sensing the emotional undercurrents that everyone else completely misses. It's like having emotional radar that never switches off. Research suggests that people with INFJ traits show heightened activity in brain regions associated with emotional processing and pattern recognition. They're literally wired to detect authenticity, emotional incongruence, and relational dynamics that operate below most people's conscious awareness. This isn't a personality quirk, it's neurological reality. But here's where this superpower becomes a burden. Society's extroverted majority has created social environments that assume everyone processes emotions the same way. Most social interactions are designed for people who can filter out emotional noise, who can engage in surface-level conversation without feeling the weight of everything that's not being said. INFJs can't do this. They feel the tension when someone's smiling but angry underneath. They notice when group dynamics are shifting. They sense when someone's being inauthentic, and it creates actual physical discomfort. Think about what this means in practical terms. An INFJ goes to a party where everyone's having fun, but they immediately detect that two people in the group are having relationship problems that nobody's acknowledging. They notice that the host is stressed about something they're not sharing. They feel the competitive undercurrent between two friends who are pretending everything's fine. While everyone else is enjoying the surface-level interaction, the INFJ is processing layers of emotional complexity that nobody else even recognizes exist. This constant emotional processing is exhausting. It's like being forced to solve complex puzzles while everyone else thinks you're just having casual conversation. Most social situations require INFJs to suppress their natural processing abilities just to appear normal. They have to pretend they don't notice what they're noticing. They have to act like they can't feel what they're feeling. This suppression takes enormous mental energy. The result is that most social interactions actually drain INFJs rather than energize them. They're not being antisocial when they decline invitations or leave events early. They're practicing psychological self-preservation. Their nervous system is telling them that continued exposure to complex emotional data without processing time will lead to overwhelm. Strategic withdrawal becomes necessary for maintaining their mental clarity and emotional stability. They need solitude to process all the emotional information they've absorbed. They need quiet time to separate their own emotions from the emotions they've picked up from others. They need space to recalibrate their sensitivity levels so they can function effectively in their next social interaction. This isn't weakness or social failure. This is advanced emotional intelligence, recognizing its own limits and managing resources accordingly. INFJs understand that their ability to read people and situations is valuable, but they also know it comes with a cost. Strategic solitude is how they pay that cost without going bankrupt emotionally. The choice to withdraw isn't about rejecting connection. It's about preserving their capacity for genuine connection by protecting themselves from the energy drain of processing everyone else's unacknowledged emotional states. They're not running away from people. They're running toward the mental clarity that allows them to show up authentically in relationships that actually matter. Most people see this withdrawal and interpret it as coldness or rejection. They don't understand that the INFJ is actually protecting something precious: their ability to feel deeply, to perceive accurately, and to connect authentically. The solitude isn't the end goal. It's the maintenance required for their psychological operating system to function at its highest level. The depth starvation defense mechanism. Here's something that sounds counterintuitive, but makes perfect sense once you understand INFJ psychology. Surface-level relationships don't just fail to satisfy INFJs, they actually increase their loneliness. Most people assume that any social connection is better than no social connection, but for INFJs, shallow relationships are worse than being alone. When an INFJ engages in small talk or superficial friendship, something painful happens in their psychology. They're not just making conversation. They're acutely aware of everything they can't say. They feel the weight of authentic connection that's being avoided. They sense the potential for deeper understanding that's being ignored. It's like being intellectually and emotionally starved while sitting at a table full of food you can't eat. Think about what small talk feels like for someone who naturally operates at emotional depth. When someone asks, "How was your weekend?" an INFJ might have experienced something profound. Maybe they had an insight about their life direction, or processed a difficult emotion, or felt a deep connection with nature. But they know the person asking doesn't actually want to hear about any of that. They want a simple, socially acceptable response. So the INFJ gives the expected answer, while internally feeling frustrated that they can't share what actually matters to them. They're forced to compress their rich inner experience into digestible social pleasantries. This isn't just disappointing, it's psychologically painful. They feel like they're betraying their own authenticity every time they engage at this level. Most people find small talk relaxing because it requires minimal emotional investment. For INFJs, it's exhausting because they're constantly aware of the gap between what they're saying and what they're actually thinking and feeling. They're performing a version of themselves rather than being themselves. This performance takes enormous energy because it goes against their natural way of processing and expressing. The INFJ wants to skip past the surface and get directly to understanding who this person actually is. They want to know what drives them, what they're afraid of, what they dream about, what they believe and why they believe it. They want to understand the person's values, their struggles, their growth edge. But most people aren't ready for that level of conversation. Most people think that's too intense, too personal, too much. When INFJs try to go deeper in casual relationships, they often get responses that shut down the conversation. People change the subject, give superficial answers, or make it clear they're not comfortable with that level of intimacy. The INFJ learns that their natural way of relating makes other people uncomfortable, so they either have to suppress it or accept that most relationships will remain frustratingly shallow. Here's the strategic choice INFJs make. They'd rather invest their limited social energy in one relationship where they can be authentic than spread that energy across 10 relationships where they have to perform. This isn't pickiness, it's resource management based on their psychological makeup. They understand that shallow connections don't just fail to nourish them, they actively drain their capacity for the deep connections they actually need. Strategic solitude becomes a way to preserve their energy for relationships that have the potential to go deep. Instead of exhausting themselves trying to find satisfaction in surface-level interactions, they choose to wait for people who can match their need for authentic connection. They use their alone time to maintain their capacity for the kind of vulnerable, meaningful relationships that actually sustain them. This selectivity protects them from the particular kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who don't really see you. They understand that being alone while maintaining their authenticity is preferable to being with people while suppressing their true nature. The solitude isn't rejection of connection. It's rejection of false connection. They're holding out for the real thing, and they're willing to be alone until they find it. Most people see this and think the INFJ is being unrealistic or demanding. But the INFJ has learned something important. Not all connection is created equal, and bad connection can be worse than no connection at all. The authenticity filter system. INFJs possess what I call an authenticity detection system that operates below their conscious awareness. It's not something they learned or developed. It's neurological. They can sense when someone is incongruent, when what they're saying doesn't match what they're feeling or believing. This creates a peculiar social challenge that most people don't understand. Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. Most social interaction requires a certain amount of performance. We wear masks. We filter ourselves. We show people the versions of ourselves we think they want to see. This is normal human behavior. This is how society functions. But the INFJ's nervous system registers all of this filtering as a form of threat signal. When someone is being inauthentic around them, INFJs feel it like discord in music. It creates actual tension in their body. They might not be able to articulate what's wrong, but they know something feels off. The person might be saying all the right things, but the INFJ detects the gap between their words and their internal state. This detection happens automatically. They can't turn it off. Here's where this becomes problematic. Instead of accepting that people are sometimes inauthentic as a normal part of human nature, INFJs often judge it. They see inauthenticity as a character flaw rather than a coping mechanism. They start to distrust people who don't show up as completely genuine all the time. This creates an impossible standard that very few people can meet consistently. Most people aren't ready to be completely authentic in every interaction. Most people need time to feel safe before they reveal their real thoughts and feelings. Most people protect themselves by showing only parts of who they are until they know how those parts will be received. This gradual revelation of authenticity is normal and healthy relationship development. But INFJs often interpret this natural caution as deception. They want people to show up as completely real from the first interaction. When people don't meet this standard, INFJs unconsciously begin to withdraw from the relationship. They're not making a conscious decision to reject the person. Their nervous system is telling them that something isn't trustworthy about the interaction. This creates a vicious cycle. The INFJ, sensing inauthenticity, becomes slightly distant or guarded. The other person, feeling this withdrawal, either tries harder to please or gives up on the connection entirely. If they try harder, they often become more performative, which triggers the INFJ's authenticity detector even more strongly. If they give up, the INFJ feels validated that the person wasn't genuine to begin with. Strategic withdrawal becomes the INFJ's way of protecting themselves from relationships built on false foundations. They'd rather have no relationship than a relationship where they constantly feel like the other person is hiding their true self. This isn't rejection of connection. It's rejection of fake connection. The problem is that this filtering system is so sensitive, it often eliminates people who could become authentic friends given time and safety. The INFJ's impatience with normal human defensiveness prevents them from experiencing the natural progression of relationships from surface to depth. INFJs use their solitude to process these authenticity conflicts and to maintain their own standards of genuine self-expression. They need time alone to check in with their own truth, to make sure they're not compromising their authenticity in response to other people's inauthenticity. Their alone time becomes a way to recalibrate their internal compass. This filtering system does serve an important function. When INFJs do connect with people, those relationships tend to be remarkably genuine. They've unconsciously screened out people who aren't ready for authentic connection, which means the relationships that survive their filter are typically deeper and more meaningful than average friendships. The challenge is learning to distinguish between people who are genuinely deceptive and people who are simply protecting themselves until they feel safe. INFJs need to develop tolerance for the normal human process of gradually revealing authenticity, rather than demanding complete transparency from the beginning. Their solitude gives them space to work on this distinction without the pressure of ongoing social interaction. They can reflect on their reactions, examine their standards, and prepare for more balanced future connections, where they can appreciate authenticity while accepting that it often develops gradually, rather than appearing instantly. The intensity calibration strategy. Here's where INFJ psychology gets really complex. When an INFJ forms a connection with someone, they don't do it halfway. They commit at a cellular level. They invest deeply. They prioritize that person significantly. They think about the person's well-being, genuinely care about their growth, and become emotionally invested in their happiness. This isn't casual friendship. This is profound bonding. The problem is that almost nobody can match this intensity level. Most people simply aren't wired to operate at the same emotional frequency that comes naturally to INFJs. This creates what I call intensity asymmetry, a fundamental mismatch in how deeply each person is experiencing the relationship. An INFJ might meet someone and feel an immediate sense of connection. They start mentally planning future conversations, thinking about how they can support this person's goals, considering how this friendship might develop over time. They're emotionally all in from early in the relationship. Meanwhile, the other person is just having a normal social interaction. They like the INFJ, they enjoy spending time together, but they're not having the same level of intense, all-consuming emotional experience. When the INFJ realizes this asymmetry, they experience what feels like profound rejection. But here's what's actually happening. The other person didn't reject them. They just weren't operating at the same intensity level. The INFJ expected an earthquake when the other person was only capable of offering a tremor. Neither person is wrong, but the mismatch creates disappointment for the INFJ, and often confusion for the other person. This pattern repeats constantly in INFJ relationships. They meet someone, become intensely bonded, realize the other person doesn't feel the same depth of connection, and withdraw in hurt. Then they're alone again, convinced that nobody can love them the way they love others. They start to believe that their intensity is too much, that they're asking for something impossible. But here's where strategic solitude becomes crucial. INFJs need alone time to calibrate their intensity without suppressing it entirely. They need space to pursue their interests and growth at their natural pace, without having to constantly adjust their energy level to match someone else's comfort zone. This prevents the resentment that builds from constantly dimming themselves for others. Most INFJs have learned to tone down their natural intensity in social situations because they've been told they're too much, too deep, too serious. They've learned to hide their excitement about ideas, to suppress their emotional responses, to pretend they don't care as much as they actually do. This constant self-suppression is exhausting and ultimately inauthentic. Strategic withdrawal allows them to be fully themselves without apology. In solitude, they can think as deeply as they want, feel as intensely as they need to, and pursue their interests with the passion that comes naturally to them. They don't have to explain why they're reading 3 books simultaneously, or why they spent 2 hours thinking about a philosophical concept, or why they're deeply moved by something most people would consider ordinary. This isn't about rejecting people who can't match their intensity. It's about accepting that most relationships will involve some level of intensity mismatch, and learning to find fulfillment in solitude when that mismatch becomes draining. They're not withdrawing permanently. They're recharging so they can show up authentically in future interactions. The solitude becomes preparation for more balanced connections. When INFJs take time to honor their natural intensity privately, they're less likely to overwhelm others with unmet emotional needs. They're less likely to expect one person to fulfill all their needs for deep connection. They can appreciate lighter friendships for what they offer, without resenting them for what they don't provide. This intensity calibration strategy actually makes INFJs better friends in the long run. When they're not desperately seeking someone to match their emotional depth, they can be more present in relationships that operate at different levels. They can enjoy casual friendships without constantly pushing for deeper connection. They can appreciate people for who they are, rather than constantly hoping they'll become more intense. Their withdrawal isn't avoidance of connection. It's preparation for sustainable connection. They're learning to manage their intensity in a way that doesn't exhaust others or disappoint themselves. The recharge and recalibration process. What most people don't understand about INFJ solitude is that it's not passive avoidance. It's active psychological maintenance. When an INFJ withdraws from social situations, they're not hiding or sulking. They're engaging in a sophisticated emotional processing system that allows them to function effectively in relationships. During social interactions, INFJs absorb enormous amounts of emotional data. They pick up on other people's moods, tensions, unspoken conflicts, and authentic feelings. This information doesn't just bounce off them, it gets internalized. They literally carry pieces of other people's emotional states in their nervous system after every interaction. Without processing time, this accumulated emotional data becomes overwhelming. The INFJ starts to lose track of which emotions are theirs and which emotions belong to other people. They might feel anxious without knowing why, or sad about something that isn't actually their problem, or angry about a conflict they witnessed but weren't part of. This emotional confusion is disorienting and exhausting. Strategic solitude gives them space to sort through this accumulated data. They need quiet time to identify what they absorbed from others and consciously release what doesn't belong to them. They need to reconnect with their own emotional baseline, to remember what they actually think and feel about their own life situations. This processing isn't just helpful, it's essential for maintaining their empathic abilities. If INFJs don't regularly clear out absorbed emotions, they become emotionally overwhelmed, and their sensitivity becomes a liability rather than a gift. They lose their ability to read situations accurately because they're carrying too much emotional noise from previous interactions. The recalibration process also allows them to prepare for future social engagement. They use their alone time to check in with their own needs, to identify what kind of connection they're seeking, and to set intentions for how they want to show up in relationships. This preparation makes them more effective in social situations because they're operating from clarity rather than reactivity. Think of it like a musician tuning their instrument between performances. The INFJ's emotional sensitivity is their instrument, and solitude is their tuning process. Without this regular maintenance, their ability to read people and situations becomes unreliable. When INFJs emerge from their processing time, they typically have renewed capacity for genuine connection. They're not carrying emotional baggage from previous interactions. They're clear about their own needs and boundaries. They're prepared to be fully present with the next person they encounter. This cycle of withdrawal and re-engagement actually optimizes their relational effectiveness rather than diminishing it. The solitude isn't permanent retreat. It's strategic preparation. They're not avoiding connection. They're ensuring that when they do connect, they can do so authentically and sustainably. Their withdrawal serves their relationships rather than undermining them. INFJ. Solitude represents advanced emotional intelligence, not social failure. Their strategic withdrawal protects their unique gifts while preparing them for the meaningful connections they're actually seeking. Subscribe for more insights into INFJ psychology and strategic self-management. If you want to continue the journey to understanding yourself or an INFJ in your life, click either of the following videos, where we continue to unlock the secrets of the INFJ personality type.